I had lived in my house for 3 years, a small two-story home that had been converted into a mother-daughter style layout. My sister, Rebecca, had the downstairs apartment, and I took the upper floor. She wasn't around much. She spent most nights at her boyfriend's place across town, so I was usually alone. It never really bothered me before. I was 30 years old. I shouldn't be afraid of spending nights by myself. But that didn't mean the silence didn't sometimes creep into my bones, making me uneasy in ways I didn't like to admit. That night, I was lounging on my couch, half distracted by a horror movie on TV. My apartment had an open floor plan, meaning my living room, dining area, and kitchen were all one big space. My couch sat in the middle of it, my back exposed to the darkened room behind me. I found myself glancing over my shoulder more than once. Not because I heard anything. Not because there was any reason to be paranoid. Just a feeling. When the movie ended, I went through my nightly routine, brushing my teeth, shutting off lights, making sure the doors were locked. I crawled into bed around 11, falling asleep almost immediately. I woke up 2 hours later, my heart pounding for no reason. At first, I thought it was just a dream that had startled me awake. But then I heard it. A voice. It came from downstairs. At first, I thought it was Rebecca. It sounded like her, and she was calling my name. But that didn't make sense. She had her own key. Why would she be shouting for me? Still groggy, I swung my legs out of bed and made my way to the door. The hallway was pitch dark, so I switched on the light, blinking as my eyes adjusted. The voice called again, clearer this time. It was definitely coming from downstairs. I made my way to the staircase, stepping carefully. "Rebecca?" I called out. No response. I descended slowly, my bare feet making no sound on the wooden steps. The downstairs was completely dark, but I could still hear her voice, muffled yet insistent. I reached for the light switch near the foyer. My fingers fumbled in the dark, but when I finally flicked it on, the kitchen light hummed to life, slowly brightening. Rebecca wasn't there. No one was. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the small apartment. The front door was locked. The windows were shut. The place was empty. And yet, I had heard her. I had heard her calling my name. A loud thump came from her bedroom. I spun toward the noise, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I had just checked that room. It had been empty. I took a step forward, but hesitated. My body screamed at me to run, but my mind refused to accept that I had imagined all of it. Gathering what little courage I had, I walked to the bedroom door. It was slightly ajar. I reached out, nudging it open with my fingertips. Nothing. The room was still. The bed was untouched. The closet door stood half open, revealing a row of hanging clothes swaying slightly, as if disturbed. I stepped inside and scanned the floor. Nothing had fallen. Nothing was out of place. I backed out of the room and hurried upstairs, locking my bedroom door behind me. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and dialed Rebecca's number. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I stayed in bed, my phone gripped tightly in my hand, listening for anything. But I heard nothing else. When the sun finally rose, I found a text from Rebecca. "Why did you call me at 1 a.m.? I immediately replied, "Were you home last night?" She responded almost instantly. "No, I was at Jason's." "Why?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what to say. Later that morning, I went downstairs again. I checked her bedroom, looking for anything that might have made that noise. But there was nothing. No fallen books, no tipped-over objects. I wanted to believe I had hallucinated it. But I had never hallucinated before. I had never had sleep paralysis, night terrors, or anything like that. And I knew, without a doubt, that I had heard her voice. A voice that wasn't hers. And worse, whoever it belonged to had been inside the house with me. Story 2. I was 17 the night it happened. My mom was working an overnight shift at the hospital, leaving me alone in the house. It wasn't the first time. I was used to it. My older brother had moved out for college, and my dad hadn't been in the picture for years. I had a girl over that evening. Vanessa. We weren't dating, but we were kind of something. She left around 11, reluctant but obedient to her curfew. After she left, I went upstairs to my room, settled into bed, and put on a random show. It was a warm night, and my bedroom window was open, letting in a soft breeze. Somewhere around midnight, I heard it. A scraping noise. It came from outside. At first, I ignored it. Probably a raccoon or some other animal scurrying around the backyard. But then it happened again. A slow, deliberate dragging sound. I sat up and looked out the window, peering into the darkness. The backyard was dimly lit by the old motion sensor light above the deck door. And that was when I saw him. A man was sitting in one of the deck chairs. At first, I thought it was my brother. Maybe he had come home to surprise me. But something about the way he sat, so still, so unnaturally rigid, made my stomach twist. I called out, "Jake." The man lifted his head. That wasn't my brother. I yanked away from the window, my heart hammering. My brain scrambled for logical explanations. Maybe it was a lost neighbor or someone drunk who had wandered into the wrong yard. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I grabbed my phone and texted a few friends. "Dude, are you messing with me? There's someone in my backyard." The responses came fast. "WTF? Call the cops." Not funny, man. I swallowed hard and dared to peek out the window again. He was still there. Only now, he was looking directly up at me. A cold wave of dread washed over me. The way he sat, motionless, staring made my skin crawl. He didn't seem confused or lost. He knew I was watching him. Summoning my courage, I shouted, "Hey, who are you?" He didn't move, didn't answer. Then his shoulders started shaking. At first, I thought he was crying, but then I realized he was laughing. Not loud, not in a way I could hear, just shaking, as if the act of laughing itself was more important than the sound. I stepped away from the window, my breathing shallow. My first instinct was to turn off my lights, make it seem like I wasn't home. But the light from my TV flickered against the walls, making it obvious someone was inside. I couldn't just sit there. I had to do something. I moved to my door and crept down the hallway. From the top of the stairs, I could see the glass door leading to the deck. The man was still there, his head tilted at an odd angle, watching the house. Then he moved. Not in a normal way. Not like a person standing up from a chair. He slumped forward first, his body collapsing, his hands hitting the deck floor. For a split second, he looked broken, like a puppet with its strings cut. Then, impossibly, he crawled toward the door. Not on his hands and knees. Not in any way that resembled a human movement. He slithered. I gasped, unable to contain the fear gripping my chest. His head snapped up at the sound. I bolted back to my room, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My hand shook as I dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? There's a man in my backyard, I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. I don't know what he's doing, but he's trying to get into my house. Can you describe him? I hesitated. How could I describe something that barely looked human? He's tall, skinny, dark hair. I swallowed. He was sitting in my deck chair, but now he's crawling toward the door. Is he armed? I don't know, I admitted. Please, just send someone. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line with me. I sat in the dark, clutching the phone, listening for any sign of movement. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, thump, a sound against the back door. Thump, thump. It was gentle, almost playful, like a child knocking on a window. My breath hitched. Then, the handle twisted. I wanted to scream, but my throat was locked. The operator's voice was distant, barely registering in my ears. Are you still there? Are you safe? I forced myself to respond. He's at the door. Stay calm. Police are minutes away. I clenched my jaw, staring at my bedroom window. If he got inside, I'd have no escape. My stomach churned at the thought. Then, the sound stopped. I strained to hear, my pulse hammering. Silence. I waited. 1 minute. 2. 5. Nothing. Then, bang. A thunderous slam against the front door. I jumped. Bang. 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 Harder this time. Then, laughter. Not distant. Not muffled. Right outside my window. I turned, my body cold with terror. He was there. Pressed against the glass, his mouth stretched into an inhuman grin, his teeth bared in something too wide, too unnatural to be a smile. His eyes locked onto mine. I screamed. Blue and red lights flashed outside. A siren wailed. The man didn't run. He didn't flinch. He just stared at me, smiling. Then, as the police car pulled into the driveway, he stepped back into the shadows and was gone. The officers found nothing. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. Nothing. They took my statement, patrolled the area, assured me I was safe. But I wasn't, because he was still out there. And I knew, deep in my bones. He'd be back. Story 3. I was 12 the night it happened. My parents had rushed out of the house in a panic after getting a phone call from the hospital. My older brother, Ryan, had been in an accident, hit by a car while riding his bike. I wasn't allowed to go with them. They didn't want me to see him like that. They took my younger sister, Emma, with them, leaving me alone for the night. It'll be a few hours, my dad had said, throwing on his coat. Just keep the doors locked. We'll call you when we know more. And then they were gone. I sat in my room, too anxious to focus on anything. I tried watching TV, playing a video game, anything to distract myself. But my mind kept circling back to Ryan, imagining the worst. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke up to the sound of the front door opening. I sat up, blinking sleep from my eyes. Finally, my parents were home. I turned off the TV and climbed out of bed. "Mom," I called, stepping into the hallway. No response. I walked to the top of the staircase and looked down. The house was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. "Dad?" I tried again. Still nothing. A heavy silence filled the air. My stomach twisted. I was sure I'd heard the door open. I took a cautious step forward, peering over the banister. That's when I saw them. 3 figures, standing in the living room. They weren't my parents. They weren't anyone I knew. A choked sound caught in my throat. I covered my mouth, my pulse hammering. The figures stood unnaturally still, their faces hidden in the shadows. My whole body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Then, one of them turned their head. A slow, deliberate movement. I ducked back, pressing my back against the wall, heart pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. My brain scrambled for explanations. Had my parents left the door unlocked? Had someone broken in? I had to call for help. My phone was in my room. I forced myself to move, slipping silently back into my bedroom and locking the door. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and dialed my mom. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried my dad next. Same result. A floorboard creaked outside my door. I froze. The sound was slow, intentional. They were coming upstairs. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type as I opened my texts and sent a frantic message to my mom. "There's someone in the house. Please come home." No reply. Another creak. Closer this time. Then, a soft knock on my bedroom door. I pressed my back against the wall, barely breathing. A moment of silence stretched between us. Then, a voice. A whisper. "We know you're in there." My stomach dropped. The knob twisted. I clenched my phone, my fingers shaking as I typed. "Mom, please answer. There are people in the house." No response. The knob rattled harder. I had to do something. I looked around the room, my eyes landing on the window. If I could get it open, I could climb onto the roof and out. Bang. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed into it. I jumped, choking back a scream. Bang. Bang. The wood splintered. The lock wouldn't hold much longer. I scrambled to the window, unlatching it as fast as I could. But as I pushed it open, another sound made me freeze. Laughter. Low and distorted, like a bad recording played at the wrong speed. I turned back, heart hammering against my ribs. Through the cracks in the door, I saw something. A single, bloodshot eye staring back at me. I bolted. Climbing onto the roof, I barely managed to pull myself up before the door gave way behind me. I didn't stop to look. I ran, my bare feet scraping against the shingles as I made my way toward the front of the house. If I could make it to the neighbors. The laughter followed me. Not from the room I'd escaped. From below. I made the mistake of looking down. One of them was standing in the yard, staring up at me. Their head was tilted at an unnatural angle, their mouth stretched into a grin that was too wide, too wrong. They lifted their arms and waved. I scrambled to the edge of the roof, trying to figure out how to get down without breaking my ankle. But before I could move, a hand grabbed my ankle. I screamed, kicking wildly. The grip was cold, fingers digging into my skin like claws. I twisted, fighting against it, and finally, it let go. I tumbled forward, barely managing to catch myself before I rolled off the roof. My body ached, my heart racing. And then, sirens. Flashing lights flooded the street as a police car screeched to a stop in front of the house. The figures below turned, their bodies unnaturally stiff. And then, just like that, they were gone. No running. No retreating into the shadows. Just gone. The officers found the front door wide open. But inside, there was nothing. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. No sign that anyone had been there at all. My parents arrived soon after, my mom frantic and in tears. My dad searched the house 3 times, checking every closet, every corner. But there was nothing. Nothing except the deep, red marks on my ankle. and the text I received a few hours later. A message from an unknown number. We'll see you soon.